Hello. I think I am on. Welcome to the Craft Beer Professionals 2021 Fall Virtual Conference. My name is Jason Gladfelter. I'll be taking you through complaints, internal complaints, not customer complaints, in the brew house and in any small business, really. Just to start off, I'm going to wait a little bit for everybody to get kind of noticed, or not noticed, chimed in, and then see if I can notice them when they come in. And just to kind of a forewarning, I have a bit of a cold, thanks to a 3-year-old in daycare. And I have so I'll be kind of going back and forth between this and my water. And I also have some whiskey, some Old Tub, which is really pretty good. It's a Jim Beam brand, unfiltered, a little bit more oak, not as sweet. It's pretty good. Help me kind of go through this a little bit. I know it's a beer conference and I am a beer geek, but I do not have a beer here because carbonation. I don't want to load myself up and then burp and belch and my way through this. So with that said, I'll go ahead and get started. I am going to talk about the importance of complaints and imperfection. I know people don't like complaints. They think they're bad, and they're not the best, but they can be good. And I'll go through why that is and what they can tell you and how to capture them in various ways. But first, let me check and see where we are. 2 minutes in, I guess I'll go to get started, make sure everybody's in. So just some background on me and my company. I have a master's in conflict resolution, which a lot of people don't know what that is, and I don't blame them. I didn't either until I got it. Basically, it's kind of a combination of personal communication, international studies, psychology, business, all kind of rolled into one. I combine that with my beer geekiness and kind of my experience in the industry. I managed a small, medium-sized mom and pop wine shop beer thing in Denver for 14 years, and expanded the craft beer selection from 2 doors to 13, and was very proud of that. And I got to sample a lot. So shout out to all of you who brought in some good stuff. And I studied in Prague for international mediation negotiation, drank a lot of Ufleku. If you haven't been to Ufleku or know what that is, go to Prague. It's basically a dark Pilsner. Fantastic. Drank a lot of that. I founded the Brewery Mediation Network when I was at Oval Options for Conflict Management. In 2014, I founded it and directed it and mediated some trademark disputes, partnership disputes in the brewing industry and elsewhere. I decided when COVID hit, that kind of went south because we do in-person mediation, or we did, and which is what I like to do. But when COVID hit, we had to ditch that, and Oval Option decided went one way, and I wanted to keep focused on the small business and the brewing industry, and really help them out through my experience at the Brewery Mediation Network. I found out that there's a lot of internal dynamics that need help, and not only in breweries and small businesses, and that's in any small business you have. But again, since I'm a beer guy, that's kind of where I focus. But I do, so I've started Vombuds, which is Virtual Ombudsman LLC, and that is helping people with, or helping businesses with their internal dynamics, confidential, independent, informal, neutral, it's personal. Anybody who calls me, no one else will know you called, except when there's imminent danger. If I judge there's imminent danger to someone or yourself, then I'm going to take appropriate steps. But other than that, pretty secret. But I focus on internal issues. I don't do customer complaints. I can give tips on that, but I don't want customers to call because that's between the customer and the business. And that's what we'll be talking about today. So I also did the pub dialogues, which I hope to get started again. That is an event, kind of a monthly series that I put on. 2012, I think it was the first at the Wynkoop Brewery downtown Denver. I'm in Denver, um, and we basically go to a brewery, have people, strangers, invite strangers to attend and talk about specific topics that are kind of contentious, like taxes and education and whatever, and then we facilitate it, and we keep conversation interactive, collaborative, civil, and just get people talking again, face to face, which now, hopefully we'll get that back started uh, again. But okay, so the agenda, uh, kind of a little background on what I'm going to do here. Since people are different in 1,000 ways, this affects how they interact and how complaints and issues that they could complain about, how do they interact with those complaints. Some people love to complain. Some people just say, hey, grin and bear it. They don't like the idea of complaining. Whichever is the case, the issue of what would spur on that complaint is still there, even if you swallow that complaint or you just spat it out. Uh, they don't magically disappear. And complaints, whether they're voiced or not, they have information. And that's what we're going to try to get at to today. One challenge is that a complaint is basically a criticism of something. It could be your team, your actions, your business. It's not easy to hear criticism, and it's also not easy for people to criticize others. So sometimes they swallow those complaints and they don't do anything about it. So when a complaint is born, where does it go and how is it handled? And we're going to get into that. There's no cookie cutter approach here. There's going to be some tips on at the end that probably should combine. It all depends on where you're at, where your business is, what do you like. Um, we're going to highlight the importance of complaints with some cost effects, um, and some of the mechanisms to help address them. The first thing I want to do is go through the kind of start from kind of the why are complaints important. Basically, it's health and money. That's pretty easy. Once you dig into it, it starts to make sense. No pun intended. We money and health are kind of that's the bottom line. There's everything in the middle that needs to be sorted out, but this is why I want to focus on uh, a complaint system or complaint programs or how you would handle complaints and why they're important. They provide insight into team dynamics. I mean, you can read all this. They reflect management. They can offer ideas. They can open lines of communication that may be stymied a little bit. Hold on a second. Old tub time. Yeah, that's good. But what's kind of overlooked a little bit is the health aspect. Not necessarily in the complaint itself. There can be issues where complaints get out of hand or people don't respond to them well, and then there's kind of retribution taken too far, and that can be kind of physical. It can also be a little bit emotional. But basically, the health benefits or the health detriments, they're stressful. The chemicals that are released in your fight or flight when you see a lion coming after you or whatever, if you have lions, that the same adrenaline, the same chemicals, they also are produced when there's false fear, and false fear is kind of like anticipate something that you don't want to do, or and that's usually what a complaint is. It's if you go into work and you really don't like what's going on, that dreaded feeling of going in. If it's that, and that's just the small part. Some of the other false threats are a little bit more salient. So those chemicals are produced. Now, once, no big deal. Okay. Um, but when that happens, what is a life threatening all of those chemicals, the blood goes to your muscles. It doesn't go to your head. It doesn't go to your liver, kidneys, wherever. And that's fine in that situation. But over time, those chemicals become toxic, and you can really start to feel the effects of it. Um, and I have a quote here from if I can pronounce his name correctly, Thich Nhat Hanh. People have a hard time letting go of their suffering. Out of a fear of the unknown, they prefer suffering that is familiar. So even if it's a small suffering, and those chemicals are just released a little bit, they'd rather prefer to do that rather than confront the issue that they would complain about. And that has a long-term effect. It can affect others. It can affect your physical health, um, and stuff that would kind of stimulate false fears. I got some here. The unknown, like we were talking about, feeling of all alone. This like something is just happening to you, and it's personal, and you're just all alone. You don't have anybody to talk to or help you out, or you think you don't. Disagreements and disputes, we all have those. Uh, Getting into difficult conversations, and the fear of losing something. The fear of loss is, in most of us, greater than the anticipation or promise of gain. It's kind of interesting how that works, but that can have an effect on how these chemicals are released and when. So these are some of the chemicals. Epinephrine, large amounts are toxic. The cortisol suppresses the immune system, so over time, your immune system gets bombarded by all this. We are comfortable with the familiar, like we just said. This would affect your memory, um, to hanging on to complaints, or not realizing that you can actually complain about something. And complain has just such a negative connotation too. It's complain, it's some complaining, but really it's, hey, you're saying, hey, something isn't right here. I would like some help with it. Uh, and again, some people do that more than others. Whether they do or not, it's important that there is something triggering that emotion, and that's what we try to get to. And once this false fear starts, it's difficult to stop, because you become familiar with that, and you don't want to change it because you don't know what it changes into. So the money, this is business side of it. It's being a conflict management. It's difficult to sell this idea because it's similar to anti-terrorism. How do you know it's working? Well, if there's no terrorism, then I guess it's working. If there's no conflict, I guess it's working. But to me, conflict can be a good thing. I think I'll get to that here in a little bit, once we get to the cost of it. But the money of a complaint, again, the complaint is the realization that something is wrong. There's a dispute or a tension or friction. So if that happens at work and you're the business owner or the boss, the business is paying that dispute. So I have an equation here coming up. The health issues, the health impacts cost money, and that's absenteeism, that's health insurance, that's whatever, all that costs money. Production can decrease and sales decrease, and your publicity, and you burn some bridges, and it's a snowball effect, that a complaint that goes ignored, or is not treated, or is just not expressed, can snowball. It can get out of hand. And here's a formula here, for a dispute. So studies have shown that, and there's a lot of them. And if I didn't put them all on here, if you want them, I could certainly give them to you. A conservative amount of how much a dispute takes the time of an employee is about 3% of a workday. And that doesn't sound like much, but here we go. Here's over the year, it's just hours of work, but just a student works a week times the constant of it's I have 0.031, 3% is the hourly wage, 51 weeks a year, taking a week off for holidays. You can work that down to 50 if you want, or whatever it is. Excuse me, hold tub. Yeah, to do a chaser of water. Yeah, all right. So the 3% is conservative. Some have it as high as 4, even 5%. So if we plug some numbers in, we have Bill works 24 hours. So it's you're paying the dispute $455.32 a year. You're paying the dispute, and a dispute is rarely just one person. So you add that in, and what I mean by dispute, what the time it takes is lack of concentration or focus on a task. It's texting someone about the situation. It's just not working hard. It's showing up late, leaving early, maybe calling in sick. All this adds into that 3%. So, and there's some other things. So that's why I say it could be the lowest I've seen is I think 2%, and the highest is 5. So I went with 3 on this. So if you add the other employee in who's also involved in this dispute, usually it's 2, not all the time, of course. And then you add a manager who has to hear about it off and on, or has to take the time to cover some work that's not finished, or explain to another worker that they have to cover another shift. Again, that's about 3%. So all that total, you're paying the dispute $2,000 a year just to have the dispute, and that does not include the more. Excuse me. You have the lost production, the turnover if people are just fed up and the problem is the issue isn't addressed at its core. For litigation, that's expensive. That's expensive just to start, not to mention going through it, and not to mention the public image that would have, not only the litigation, but the gossip or the rumors or the spreading of the news of, hey, this place has this going on, blah blah blah, is not ideal for a public image. And I think I say it later on here. It's like the complaints will follow the path of least resistance. If that path is Yelp or their neighbor or a customer, that's where that complaint is going to go. And that's what we want to try to create, another path that's simpler for them, easier to voice those complaints. And it's just not the path, it's also the destination and how that complaint is handled and all that. So if you add that $2,000 into whatever you lose here, especially litigation, the zeros on the right side of the decimal keep coming up. All right, so the complaints itself. Let's get on to that. And like I said, complaint is the externalization of some issue that's in dispute, or a dispute itself. So, internal complaints from employees, management, ownership, even the investors, can reflect a level of tension and severity of erosion within the company. The complaints are, I probably should say, complaints can act as a gauge of internal pressure. I hate to do absolutes and say that they are the gauge of, but they can be. And for the most part, they usually are. And some of the mediations and consultations I've done with breweries and other small businesses is once a dispute reaches management or ownership, then, especially if there's multiple owners, then you kind of have factions. and then you have team versus team, or friends versus friends of this one partner and friends of this other partner, and they have factions. Communication is tarnished. The cooperation and teamwork is just devastated, and you're banging your head on a wall, an expensive wall, for multiple reasons. So I've seen it be an actual gauge of the internal pressure, and it kind of depends on how many complaints, how many different unique complaints, how many of the same complaints from different people, and how those complaints are handled. So there's a lot that goes into it. So like I said, a complaint is response to an outward or to and the outward communication of discomfort with a certain dispute. And a dispute is vague. I know it is. That's what my conflict resolution degree is full of, is vagueness. What does it mean to have a conflict? What does it mean to have a resolution? Like, peace is what people always talk about, but peace isn't the end of conflict. The U.S. and Soviet Union were at peace for 50 or whatever years, 70 years. Was there conflict? Yeah, there was. The issue was not resolved, or issues. And one of the things with conflict management and resolution, the field itself is populated immensely with NGOs and nonprofit, and it's very kumbaya, peace, which is fine, except for in business, that's not. It doesn't quite. You have to tweak it a little bit to go into the business, and that's what we do here. Sorry, I got old tongue again. Granddaddy's medicine. Okay, so complaint. Let's go back to dispute. A dispute is a disagreement. It is a non-meshing of two or more things, and there's good friction with that when that happens. I think I get to that in a little bit, but I'll just get to it now. The friction in the tires on your car with the road, that's good friction. If you didn't have it, like if you're on an icy surface, you kind of don't have control and you run into a tree or a chihuahua or whatever it is. When you have that friction, you can turn it. You can move, you can turn, you can actually control where you're going. And again, what we try to do is take that friction, find out where it is, and turn it into a positive. And if we can't do that, then try to eliminate whatever that causing that bad friction. So complaints, they have a negative connotation. It's just the word. The word complain just sounds annoying. It's just complain. But they do have important information that we're going to try to get to. And they, like I said before, they can't exist. Complaints can't exist without someone complaining. So if there is an issue or a dispute or a friction that's bad, if no one complains about it, it's just going to keep going. So you don't want to stifle complaints. Capturing, understanding, responding to this information is crucial to the business and the personnel. Like we said, the health of the personnel, the money of the business, really are important. Kind of the last three bullets I bolded because complaints aren't bad. They have information. They can exist in silence. They have a complaint, at least to your business. Because somebody, like I said, they follow the path of least resistance. The complaint can exist outside the company, and you don't know about it. So to find ways to understand it, it's like gears of a car or a motorcycle or even a watch. Since your internal dynamics are full of different people, just like different gears of the car, of the watch, the different shapes and sizes, and the people of different genders and sex and politics and social activism or whatever it is, there's going to be friction. And it's great to have diversity. I strongly encourage it. I also strongly encourage the acknowledgement that there's going to be friction, and there has to be a way for you to lubricate, be the oil of that friction. Otherwise, the engine will cease. Now, electric cars kind of put a damper on my analogy here because they don't have much friction. They don't have oil. Low maintenance on that. So we don't talk about them. So the root of a complaint, the complaint itself is just the tip, the iceberg, and everything else is beneath it. What is underneath it? Underneath it? What is under it and beneath it can feed upon itself, can feed into larger things, can feed into other smaller things, and that's where the 5 pillars of conflict reside, and that's where they once those pillars start building, that's where the disputes become more salient. Complaints become more could be louder, depends on where they go. But the 5 pillars, and I have a whole thing on the 5 pillars: intent versus impact, person or the problem, separating those two, position versus an interest, which is almost a training by itself. Toxic language and assigning motivation are kind of the 5 pillars, and that's what all this will kind of expand. And once those pillars are set, then it's really hard to get. They can be removed. It takes a little bit more time. Speaking of time, okay, going faster than I thought. So the silence. Why do you not hear complaints? You may not have complaints in your business. That could happen. And good for you if you've done that. But if you don't hear any complaints, here are some reasons why. There's distrust in the company's motivation or ability to address that complaint. There's fear of retaliation, ridicule, repercussions. That's when the complaints of bullying and harassment. That's the fear of retaliation. Maybe the ostracization is a motivating factor not to complain. Personal difficulty listening and giving criticism, unclear as to the nature of the concern. They just need to talk it out, but there's no one to talk it out to, so they stay quiet. None of their business. It's no big deal. I can handle it. Some people just like to complain, and some people don't. But even if people like to complain or they don't like to complain, like I said, it doesn't remove the complaint itself. And it also could reflect something in their personal life that they're struggling with as well. And it's hard to say it's the business's business to dive into the personal life, but there are ways a business can provide help. EAPs are a great one, employee assistance programs. But I'm just saying that there could be something else besides they're just silent. Excuse me. Okay, so we'll do the dynamics of it real quick here. Like I said, they'll follow the path of least resistance. And what is that path? The path is the movement depends largely on 2 factors. What is that path of least resistance? The least amount of dread, comfort in doing it, simplicity and communication, timeliness, accessibility, proximity to technology. All that has a role to play in how someone complains and where someone complains and to whom someone complains. It's extremely easy to get on the internet and just complain. It's not rewarding. It could maybe feel a sense of revenge or maybe venting, but it doesn't really do anything. I can't say that. Rarely does it do anything constructive. And then a desire to act, a personal involvement. Is it worth it? Is it a big deal? Are they even part of that complaint? Maybe they did something that they think contributed to it and they don't want that. And then the risk of what happens. Lava is hot. So lava here is the complaint or the issue behind it. I mean, what usually happens is people sit on it, it festers, they take it home, externalize it, they breathe fire, which is the bad venting, which is the typing on the thing. They attach it to something else. It alters their perspectives and translations of how others are interacting with them and how they're interacting with others themselves. Revenge and toxicity, and then they leave. their position. What we want to strive to is vent to release and clarify. Don't attack, discuss it further. Is there something else besides this complaint that's maybe triggering in? What's the magic wand? What do you really want? If I had a Harry Potter wand or whatever the heck it is, a stick, magic stick, and I said, poof, this is what you want. What is it? Sometimes people don't actually know what they want. They just, the desire to complain or the pressure to complain is their position, and the interest is what they really want. Review it, address it, and repair. That's what we're striving for. Time. Okay. Got about 15 minutes. Okay. So a complaint system, the operational complaint system. What do you want? What it should have. I'm going to do primary, secondary, and then kind of an overall characteristics, I guess you'd call it. So primary, you want to encourage that internal feedback. You want to provide a pathway for that feedback and streamline those complaints in the appropriate direction. You address complaints privately when possible, preferable. Highlight potential critical issues and areas that need attention, and help personnel with challenges and even changes if that comes out. Excuse me. That's the primary. That's the, tick those off. Secondary is what do those primary things actually do, or what the actual complaint system could actually do by doing those things is approximate level of internal trust within and toward the company. It could categorize complaints into bullying, scheduling, communication, tasks, all that. It can release internal pressure and frustration if it's vented properly, improve communication and critique skills. I would say critiquing skills, typo there. Help create a safe place for personnel, physically, personally, emotionally, psychologically. And contain the friction from affecting external connections and kind of use that friction a little bit. And it can avert or reduce formal grievances. Now, formal grievances are more of a legal written thing. They're attached to formal procedures that may involve HR and legal avenues. And that's where you put the company on notice. This is a grievance. I think labor unions use those a lot. I'm not quite sure. So the characteristics, kind of the result, the protect against retaliation, focus on paths toward a solution, provide timely response. I'm just reading these. I think the biggest one is, if I were to pick one, being trusted, the last one, is very important, because if it's not trusted, it's not going to be used. And if it's not used, then there's no protection, there's no accessibility, there's nothing else. Especially to ensure voices are heard. Ensuring voices are heard is active listening. It's providing evidence to the person who is speaking that, yeah, you actually are hearing them. You're not just having all the stuff come at you. You're actually hearing and understanding what they're saying. That takes time, and it takes a little bit of, well, it takes a lot of skill if you get into some of the weeds of some of the complaints. So we'll get into the good stuff here. Ooh. Variety of complaint systems. There are several. And you can use these in conjunction. You can use them separately. I'll go through some of the pros and cons. And just to clarify, I am one of those options. And I'll be happy to answer any questions. So perhaps a little bit of bias here, but we'll go into the first one. Ideally, perfect world, personal communication, peer-to-peer communication, pipeline directly to whatever the issue is, and have that be talked about and discussed in a way that not only is the issue addressed, but also the person who is feeling the pressure, feels that pressure removed. Ideally, fantastic. I would love this. It wouldn't cost you anything except training of people if you had to do that. It becomes more difficult as a company grows and the staff, for whatever reason, changes, grows, decreases, is moved, whatever it might be. It does require each person to possess adequate and almost, well, I will say extraordinary, because extraordinary skills, trusting each other, and the language has to be the same. And that means not just the dialect or the English or Mandarin or whatever, the lingo, the trends, the jargon, the little nuances that we have, the slang, that all has to be understood. Sense of humor, this is a big one that I I possess, and I am careful unleashing it sometimes because it's different. Human resources, HR departments, typically they handle the complaints. Not many small businesses have an HR department or a focused individual on HR. It's usually someone who, in a small business, that is assigned HR functions, and they're like, I guess I could do it. And you have to. I mean, there are certain things that HR does that is important and critical to the business, compliance and payroll and job descriptions and benefits and training and onboarding and all this stuff, even firing. And there, say most HR and the kind of the smaller businesses are busy doing that. That complaints aren't the primary concern. Sometimes they are. It depends on the HR. Confidentiality is not guaranteed through HR. They do the best they can, but they represent the business, and they do initiate formal processes that the complainant has no control over. They may not want to turn somebody in. They just may want to talk about it or get some ideas. But if it comes to HR and they're violating something or potentially violating something, HR has to do something about it. I love HR. I think there's like I said, they do a lot of the stuff that is needed. My kind of issue with it is it's less human side of things than I would like. But that's just me. I'm the peace studies, kumbaya guy here. So we'll go to software and apps. Now, there are a lot of apps and software coming out. I don't know them all. I am on the older side. I am 48, so some of these things I don't know. I know that some can be easy to use, and they collect data, and large companies can use them. They are anonymous, and they could do a lot of the reporting. Some of the cons, my biggest one is security and confidentiality. I have no idea how secure those things are. They can be expensive, depending on your definition of expensive. They're data driven, somewhat inflexible. They have no personal attention that I have seen, and that's a big one for me. That's what you need, a personal attention to clarify what that situation is. And it's also prejudiced toward user knowledge and accessibility to app software and hardware. QR codes, I never used a QR code until COVID, and I went to one of the breweries and they said, okay, take a picture of this QR thing and then you can get a beer. And I'm like, I just want a beer, man. I wanted 3 after that. So I actually had to download a QR code app. That's whatever. Comment cards are old or been used a lot in recent or in history. Here are some cons with that. I won't go through them because we are getting crunched on time here. The biggest one is, or 2 biggest ones for me, is where do you put the comment box? You can see someone dropping in it. There's no confidentiality there, and handwriting can give away things. Even if you're doing a complaint, how you express that complaint can give away your identity. And it's probably best for customers. That's great because handwriting or whatever. But for internal, I won't say I won't say not to have it. I would say it's a good idea to have it. Just make sure that you're kind of covering some things here. Surveys, again, there's some pros and cons here. They can be anonymous, could be quick. They can provide awareness. They don't have any. You're not assured that people are being heard, as being clarified. Survey questions can come from the management's perspective. There could be the wrong questions according to people answering the survey. And you have to brace yourself for the bad things when they come back and the surveys come back. And then what do? You have to act on it. Okay, well, how do you act on it? And again, excuse me. Ooh, there's a burp. Not bad, not a bad thing to have. I would strongly have it with something else. External resources, that's me. And others, there's some other external resources as well. You have to do your research on this. The coverage, what they offer can vary. The prices can vary. They can fill the gaps of other systems or they can stand alone. Depends on what it is. It also, confidentiality, it depends on what it is. Again, if it's an external HR, I'm not sure about their confidentiality coverages for complaints. I don't know. External services can also provide mediation, training, coaching, facilitated groups, stuff like that. So again, that's me. So I'm not going to harp on this too much, but there it is. A buddy system. It's a bit tricky to set up and maintain, and it can be an agreement within your company that, hey, if someone has a complaint, employee A goes to employee C, and employee C goes to either management or maybe someone outside, and then that person brings the complaint to whoever needs to become aware of it. Since each company is different, there's no standard system. Again, this is kind of, the personal communication would be great. The buddy system would be second great, and then you'd filter out the rest. I think this would be excellent to have. It's tough when that buddy system, if a complaint is with the other person, with your buddy. But it could happen. So takeaway real quick. I got about 45 seconds. So disputes exist. Bad ones damage, good ones can help the company. Complaints, whether voiced or not, contain information. You want to get that information through a system and get to the root of that complaint, because that will give you an indication of how your business is operating. And it can help save money. And there's the systems and stuff are there. There's no magic wand, no cookie cutter. You could have a various of these. You just have to talk it over, do some research. One quote from Lincoln, this movie Lincoln, not the president, I don't think. A compass that'll point you true north from where you're standing, but gives no advice about swamps, deserts, chasms that you'll encounter along the way. If in pursuit of your destination, you plunge ahead heedless of obstacles and achieve nothing more than to sink in a swamp, what's the use in knowing true north? And I see this in some of the trainings on everything, is that they'll tell you what to do, when to do it, and they don't teach you how to do it. They don't navigate. And what I want to stress on this is a 45-minute presentation. It gives you kind of directions. It does not give you navigation. You need to put in time to get someone to help navigate it or navigate it yourself. But just having trainings isn't the end all be all. So there it is. Time stop, 45 minutes. Let me stop sharing here and get back. Oops. How do I do this? Oh, there we go. Okay. So, any questions? Let me see comments here. Start over and say, okay, is there training for active listening and some other? Okay, so this is a comment. Is there training for active listening and some of the other things that are most effective in handling complaints. Yes, there are several. I've done several myself. For active listening, yes, there are trainings. I would prefer someone do a workshop, which is training, but it's also interactive where you practice active listening and in front of the trainer or the facilitator, especially when handling complaints. Really, active listening should be used all the time. It's exhausting and it does take effort. It just you want to get a complaint understood and you want the complainant to be heard, to felt like they're being heard, and to know that someone is actually listening and taking care of what they're saying. It's that helps everything else after that. That helps with resolving the situation. That helps with uh, uh, with administering resolutions, with further trainings. Yes, there are active listening trainings and workshops. A retreat would be awesome. A retreat in Bahamas, for a week or something, it'd be sweet. But sadly, that's not realistic. Yes, but there are trainings. I would look for that. Let me see if there are any more comments. And I would say for active listening, if you're researching that for trainings, look at who it is, what their background is. Especially if it's, you want to see if it has mediation or some conflict management or experience, even psychology would help. And what you want to do is focus on reframing, non-interruptions, which is hard to do, which is focus on practicing how not to think of a response while listening to someone. Usually when somebody's talking, you're thinking of a response. And if you're thinking of a response, you're not listening, which is, some people say I'm quiet, which I am. I'm not a huge talker, which is why my voice is going, but I'm listening. And I'm not saying anything because I'm listening. And if you're talking or you're taking notes, you're not listening. Taking notes, it's hard to get over that one though, because you do want to write it down, not forget it, but you also want to give them the attention that they're wanting, so you can understand what they're saying. So I'd focus on those things when you're looking for it. And I'd rather do in person. I would rather that be in person. It would almost have to be active listening. Maybe not. Maybe you could do it on Zoom or StreamYard or anything else. I would prefer it in person because there's so much body language that you miss out to on internet. So okay, I think I'm gonna X out when I'm done here. So excuse me, I am finished. In case you're wondering, that is a puzzle behind me. 42 or 4,500 pieces we put together. It's a castle with a beer garden and little cherubs flying around with beers. There's bull and bush bobbleheads here. So, okay. Well, I thank you for watching and enjoy the rest of I guess there are a couple more presentations coming up. And thank you, Andrew and Craft Beer Professionals, for having me on, and look forward to the next one, and catch y'all later. If you have any questions, just let me know. I'm at jason@vombuds.com. So pretty easy. All right. Take care, babe.